business tips to successfully start and run your business so your business doesn't run you. And more importantly, we provide personal development tools to create a better version of yourself to provide the solid foundation for your life and business to stand upon. This is the Biz Reveal, and I'm your host, Craig Sawyer. This week's episode is sponsored by Sawyer Health Solutions. Protecting what's important to you is what's important to us. Get your free health insurance quote at SawyerHealthSolutions.com. Your company website is one of the most important representations of your brand, and Max Sher takes us through the process. Max explains the best ways to attract attention to your site, how to best utilize text and visual content, and the most common mistakes to avoid in the design of your website. After the show, learn more at max@sheragency.com. This is the Biz Reveal Podcast with this week's guest, Max Sher. How do you decide what to put onto your website? Like, what do you want to put in there? And then also, what do you want to not put in there?
Yeah, that's a great question. So the first thing that you need to orient this entire discussion around is, how does this website make money for your business? Right. So do you want to use your website as an example?
Sure.
So tell me.
I don't mind doing that. So I have multiple websites because I do have multiple sides of my business, but my primary business is in health insurance. And health, I'm not sure I want to use that one as an example because it's very restricted on what we can and cannot say because of federal regulations, and we can't talk about specific products. So I have a coffee business, an e-commerce coffee business. And I definitely need to remake that website because it just, SEO-wise, there's not a lot of words on the actual website itself. So let's use that as an example. For somebody who has an e-commerce business or they sell products on their website, how do we utilize the website to funnel and drive traffic?
Yeah, so in terms of the content that's on the website, there's a few things that we would need to discuss. And I'll tell you, e-commerce is kind of far and few between for me. So that's, I'm much more comfortable with subjects like health insurance, for example, where it's more lead gen.
You know what, if that works for you, let's use that.
Okay, cool. So for health insurance, right? Or for, any kind of lead generation business, we have to orient the entire pathway that a customer can move through towards filling out a form, or taking some other kind of conversion action like scheduling an appointment or something of that nature. And the way that you can do that is by identifying the biggest questions that you get as a salesperson in your first call and making sure that you clearly answer those quickly on the website.
Okay.
Now, it can be done vertically, like as someone scrolls, or ideally you want to have a quick, like at a glance when someone lands on the page, where they can go to find all of those answers and they know immediately when they land. So an example would be like for your healthcare business, if you have, tell me, like, what are some of the big questions you would get? Is it like, what are the rates?
Obviously the biggest one is, how much is this going to cost me? Which of course nobody can answer unless we get further questions. So the questions that I always have to ask them first would be like, age, zip code, and gender. Is the information I have to get from somebody to be able to get a quote back to them.
Awesome. So in a case where you can't give them a price on the website, you need the button, like the main call to action, would serve that purpose, and it would say something like request a quote or get a quote or get an instant quote if you have that capability. So that's where you would answer that one. In my industry, for example, there's other questions that like I get asked all the time, like how long is this going to take is a big one when you're making websites. So one of the main things that you see when you land on my site, there's not very many buttons. The biggest one, like one of the big ones says process or timeline, and then you direct them towards the answers to the questions that they're looking for. Or another one would be portfolio. Like that's the other thing that everyone's looking for when they're looking for a web designer. So you make that very visible on landing. In your case, maybe it's success stories or case studies or something of that nature.
Testimonials.
Yeah, testimonials are really important too. So when you just have to kind of do a deep dive into like what the questions are that you get from your customers on the first call. And then the ones that are the most common, you want to just have those be the top level navigation links on your top bar, the very top of your website.
Okay. All right, so you're going to make a separate tab for each one of those, I guess what you would call answers and responses to the most asked questions so they can just say, that's the question I have, click, I'm going to go to that. And then that page would then in turn give them the information that they're looking for, correct?
Exactly.
Okay.
So instead of showing the information that you want them to see, show them the information that they want to see, and then sprinkle like your testimonials and your success stories throughout that. If that's not what they're there to find out. Because in most cases, testimonials aren't what they're looking for. In some industries that might not be true. Like case studies, for example, might be something that, someone who's looking for a consultant might be looking to find. But in other cases, you would just want to have those appear as people are scrolling.
Okay. Just as an extra bonus of, okay, now I got this information. What do people think about how this person is providing that information and what are their responses? All right. And you mentioned, of course, the form, right? And I think that's the goal. And that's my goal with my website, because the form is my potential customer filling out the information that I need to respond to provide the quote. And again, it has those specific questions on there, the age, gender, and zip code questions. And that's basically all the information I require from them. Of course, it has email address on there, so I can create a mailing list and things like that. So if you have those forms on there, they can fill out. And here's something I'm missing. I have the form, but I don't have a way of including like analytics on that form or be able to attach it. I don't know how to attach it to like a mailing list and, how to capture that information and keep it.
Yeah. So the way most people do that is through the use of something called a CRM, a customer relationship manager. And what that'll do is it'll take all of your contacts and organize them by properties that matter to you. So maybe you need to differentiate between people who are self-employed, or maybe they're employed by a company and they're looking for, better usage of their insurance packages. I'm not sure specifically how it would play out for your industry, but it'll give you all this information. If you use a good one like HubSpot, for example, it'll tell you like what city they came from. It'll tell you what page referred them to your website. It'll give you the full path that they took on your website, so you can see what information they were interested in. There's all this details that help you actually make your sale, that you can collect and store in like one record keeping database. And then if you choose to use it with like a mailing list like MailChimp or ActiveCampaign, it'll automatically pull information from their interactions with those campaigns too.
How difficult is it to get those two to communicate? Like if I was setting it up, obviously I'm not the most technologically advanced person. I do pretty well, but there's just some of these things I just don't know. How difficult is it if I wanted to get a CRM which I've used before, so at least I know what that is and how they work. But if I wanted to get one and attach it to the website, how hard is it to set that up? And of course, I know somebody like you, that's what you do. So would you recommend me using somebody else in that case to make it work effectively, or is this something that even the novice could figure out on their own?
It depends how tech savvy you are in general. It's really not that bad. It depends a lot on how your website was built originally. Like if you're using like WordPress, for example, or even Squarespace probably has a lot of pre-built integrations and stuff. But most of the time, for 90% of what you're going to need with your website, there's some kind of pre-built solution that will do 80 to 90% of the work for you.
Okay.
And this is a good example of that. It's actually not very tough at all anymore. It's just installing a plugin, configuring this field goes to the first name column, this field goes to the last name column, and it's actually it's a pretty intuitive process, I'd say.
Okay. And what's the benefits of doing that? I know, obviously the obvious ones is being able to create a newsletter list or email list and things like that. But what are some of the other benefits that there might be to, keeping those types of analytics?
Actually, my favorite usage of a CRM is not the analytics. It's useful like when you're in an individual sales call, but in the macro perspective of your business, what's really useful for me is using it to define your sales process. So, I break my CRM into like columns. So I'll have like a first meeting scheduled, new lead, awaiting follow-up. And like you can use it to kind of track someone as they move through your pipeline and determine when they need to be followed up with. And every morning, the first thing I do before I take any meetings is I just go look at my pipeline and I say, okay, who's waiting on something from me. This guy needs a proposal. This guy I haven't heard back from in a week, so I'm going to shoot him a follow-up, and you can really track all that and get measured. And those are the analytics that matter. Like what percentage of the people, when you follow up with them, the deal you win the deal, whereas you wouldn't if you didn't follow up with them. Like that's the kind of data that I'm interested
So my
in.
old school way of just keep bouncing him in my calendar is probably not the most effective way. It works for me because that's what I've always done, right? So for somebody, and I know there's a lot of people out, at least I hope there's a lot of people out there like me, so I don't feel so stupid here. But for those people who are like me, I just, keep putting them back in my calendar. Like I use 12 noon as my generic time. So all my callbacks, if I have, 15, 20 people, I just need to call back, check in on. It's not an actual appointment. It's just checking back, following up. I just throw them all in there at noon. So I know that, across the board, I've got 20 appointments at noon. It just means I'm following up with them. And I'll keep little notes in there, follow up number 3, follow up number 4, whatever one I'm on, and then make little notes. So obviously that's probably just the old school way of doing it. Whereas I could just do the same thing, but through the CRM system, right?
Yeah. And I'll tell you, if you are the only salesperson on your team and that works for you, don't change it. Like my biggest philosophy with that stuff is the best CRM or sales process is the one that you're actually going to use. Because I can't tell you how many companies have hired me to set up a CRM and sales system, and then they can't convince their team to use it because it's too complicated for them. That's no fun that's a waste of everybody's time. So the best way that I would say is, find the core essential things that are for you. And for you, if it's just following up with someone and you need to make sure that it happens, and that's the only thing that you need to get done, just do that. That's perfect.
Just don't fix what's not broken, right?
Yeah.
So if I were to switch, because this is not a new topic for me, and I know there's some things I need to change, right? I gotta continue to grow as well. If I were to switch over to a CRM, how difficult is it? And I don't want to get too far away from the web design thing here, but since we're talking about it.
Yeah.
How difficult is it to take all the appointments that I have built up in my calendar and dump them all into the CRM?
Oh, it's a bit of a pain. I would say go find someone on Upwork
and just have them.
Yeah, I wouldn't do it yourself. It's going to take the whole day.
It is a manual thing that you have to do. You can't just attach it to it and say, click, here you go. It's dumped all in there.
No, but what I would say is you want to set up the funnel that you want, the process. There's a lot of you have to set up the bones of it to be how it fits your business. You don't want to use the generic out of the box layout. You really want to structure it to match your sales style or your team sales style. And then you want to have someone just go do the manual data entry for you.
Okay. Yeah, because that's one of the things I worry about. I don't want to lose any of the future appointments that I have already set in there just to move it over into a CRM. So
yep.
Good to know. When building a website, because that's what I want to keep the topic kind of on the whole website thing here.
Sure.
What are the biggest mistakes that people make when either building their own website, or the biggest mistakes that you see in your industry that for folks who do web design like you do? What are some of the things that you want to stay away from? What are the biggest mistakes that you see that are made?
The first thing I would say, to answer your first question, is picking the right tool for the job is really important. So if you're doing a DIY website and you're not a web developer, you should probably be using Squarespace. Shopify and WordPress are the more professional website builders, I would say, for businesses that need a mid-tier website. But if you're doing it yourself, I wouldn't go with anything more complicated than Squarespace, and I wouldn't go with any of the Wix or Weebly either. I don't build client websites in Squarespace, but when a client isn't ready for a mid-tier site, when I say mid-tier, I mean you're not an enterprise level company, but you need a serious website that's going to be able to handle your marketing efforts. Then I tell them go build it on Squarespace. And if you want, I'll take a look at it after and give you some feedback.
Okay, because I use Squarespace for the podcast website.
Awesome.
And I found it was fairly easy. For the most part, it was fairly easy. And, they have the nice templates that you can, build from and things like that. So that was nice and easy. The nice, cool fonts that work with it. And then you just insert, your different pictures and obviously fonts and things like that too. So it was a great place to start for the podcast. I use Wix for my health insurance one because that was the first one I ever built. And Wix was very easy. I like, and to go on what you were just saying a second, I think it's kind of an entry level. The way I view it, it was more like an entry level website where it's just super easy to do, but maybe not as useful in some areas to be able to keep track of things.
Yeah, and maybe the tools have gotten better since I've used them. So I'm not trying to like slam these companies here. I'm sure they're doing their best, but but I found that the little things get missed on platforms like that. Like your pages aren't structured correctly for SEO. They have mobile issues, or if they don't have mobile issues, they have tablet issues, things like that are critical. Because 60% of traffic comes from mobile on average, depending on the industry. So you really want to make sure that those boxes are checked. And then the other thing I would say that people do wrong a lot when they're doing their own website is it's kind of what we were talking about earlier. They'll talk all about what they want, what they're proud of in their company, and not what their value proposition to their customer is. Like a good example of this is with a lot of technical companies. So I work with, one of my main verticals is software companies. And about half of those are founded by software engineers. Okay. And software engineers are some of my favorite people. They're so cool and so interesting, but they're very technical. And it's hard when you are very technical to not speak at that level to your customer.
All right.
But you're just going to, unless you're in a specific B2B vertical that everyone understands what you're talking about, you're really going to struggle communicating and selling to people if you speak at that level. So really, like, instead of, end-to-end encryption, you say security that you don't have to worry about. Frame things in terms that the customer understands what's the benefit to them, not what's all the hard work that you did.
Sure. What's in it for me from the perspective of the customer?
Yeah, this is commonly referred to as benefits versus features.
Okay. Yeah, and that's one of the most important things in my industry in health insurance too, because people don't want to hear about premiums, deductibles, co-pays, co-insurance. They want to know, what does it do for me when I go to use it? When I need it, what can I expect? And I think that's very good. You got to put it in regular people terms, right? Not in the tech terms. And you mentioned SEO, and SEO is a huge part of websites. So I want to talk about that for a minute too, because SEO is very important. The search engine optimization. How often is your website popping up in searches in Google or Bing or Yahoo or any other search bar, right? Is there a recommended, I'm going to ask a couple different questions when it comes to this. For one of the first ones, that because I haven't spoken about this or spoken with somebody about this ever. When it comes to photos and videos, is there a ratio that you should have mixed in? Because obviously words are going to be one of the most important things when it comes to SEO. So it can pop up when people are searching for it. What about pictures and videos? How does that work when it comes to SEO?
SEO, my philosophy on this is the optimal number is the optimal user experience. So instead of trying to game Google's algorithm, the best thing you can do is make something that's super, like, it answers the question that the page is trying to solve as quickly and efficiently as possible. So because Google tracks what you do, right? They don't just like say, Craig's site has this many words. When someone clicks on it, that's the end of what they do. They actually check and see, like, okay, when someone clicks on Craig's site, are they clicking back and then going to the next option? And then they demote you based on that. So you want to provide the best user experience so that someone stops looking for the answer to their question after they get to your site. So if the best way to do that is through an infographic, do it with an infographic. Use alt tags so Google can like read what it's about. And alt tags, for those who don't know, are like little descriptions that you write so that A, Google can understand what the picture is, and B, people with disabilities can understand what the picture is. Like maybe they can't see, so they have like a screen reader. So use alt tags on your images to make sure that Google can read it. But you do want to have like certain number of words, because Google isn't going to promote it if there's none. But I would say solve the problem first and then worry about Google's algorithm.
Gotcha. Because one will probably resolve the other. If you're solving the problem, it is going to rate you higher anyway, because you're solving the problem. And that's the whole point of them doing the search to begin with.
Exactly.
When it comes, and this might be sliding off the SEO thing, but when it comes to grabbing attention of people, again, photos and videos kind of is where I'm getting at, because I know I don't want to see a page full of words. If I see a page full of words, I'll read the first sentence maybe, and then I'm turned off because I'm like, that just looks like a lot of work, right? So as far as grabbing attention, because you want to keep people on your website, you want them to read all the stuff that you have to say, that, you know, how you can help them. Is there a benefit, a ratio, a magic wand? Is there anything to kind of flow with the pictures and videos that you use? Again, I know going with solving the problem, right? It's got to relate. But is there a benefit to using pictures and videos to keep that attention, or is it just about what you say?
In terms of like keeping people's attention, what I say is you do want to use a lot of media assets like pictures and videos for sure. And they have to be, you know, they have to speak to whatever problem it is that they're trying to solve for sure. But you're correct on, you don't want to have large paragraphs of text. I actually, in my designs that we produce, you know, in 2021, we really don't use paragraphs at all. Other than like a blog post. Like if there's a video on the left and some text on the right, it's like a big headline with a few bullet points underneath it. And that's as much as anybody needs to see. And if you can't condense your message to a few bullet points, you probably need to think about what you're trying to say a little bit more. Okay.
And narrow it down, because we are a generation of headlines, right? I mean, we're used to scrolling on Facebook and Instagram, and we pretty much just see headlines. So I think the attention span, but typically the headline or bullet point directs them somewhere else that they can get more information if you've done a good job of fitting that need with that headline that you used, right? And then they can go to somewhere else. So when you do that on the website, because I know it's different on social media than it would be on a website. When you're doing that on a website, are you trying to direct them to a certain page to fill out a form?
Yeah. So on my website, if you scroll through, you'll see on every single section of every single page, there's a button that says start a project. Okay. And a lot of times people aren't going to click it because that's not what they're on that section for. But when they are ready to click it, I want it to be there.
When you're self-employed, whether as an independent contractor or a business owner, when it comes to health insurance, you're on your own. Health insurance for the self-employed individual is imperative. When you get sick or injured, you aren't working and you don't get sick days. You may end up facing staggering medical expenses and loss of income. Health risks and uncertainties are a part of life. You can't always plan when you get sick, but you can be prepared for the financial aspect. The best way to be prepared against uncertain health risks is with the right health insurance plan. Call Sawyer Health Solutions today for your free consultation and quote. Allow us to put a plan together that makes sense for your situation. Call 239-677-9877 or go to our website at sawyerhealthsolutions.com. Protecting what's important to you is what's important to us.
I don't want them to have to look for it at all. So making those call to actions super prominent and contrast the rest of the page. Like if you've got a white page, it needs to be black, or it needs to have like some color. It needs to be very visually distinct from the rest of the page. Making that is going to really increase your conversion rate. Also, having secondary call to actions, I think, is really helpful. So, you know, if someone's not ready to take that primary like request a quote, maybe give them a case study as a second call to action, or a white paper as a secondary call to action, or some kind of download that you have for them. And you don't need to use the same call to action in every block, right? So if you scroll down my website, you know, request a quote or start a project is the first one. But then the next section on my site is about my process. So there's a call to action for people to go click and learn more about it. You know, it should be relevant to whatever they're reading. But if you don't have anything else on your site that's relevant to what they're reading, that's when you use your main call to action.
Okay. All right. That makes sense. Do graphically, visually, what is most attractive to people in general? And I know that it might vary from industry to industry. I get that. But in general, is it graphics? Is it photos, like realistic photos? Is it cartoons? Is it videos? Is it something that's interactive? What's going to keep, in general, people's attention to get them to stay there and click on things the way that you're hoping that they do, and they take the interest on your site?
Variety. You don't want to be showing them the same thing over and over again. So, you know, when you land on my site, for example, there's like a moving slideshow of like sites that we've done. And I don't think people are going to sit there and watch it, right? The goal is like for them to see that there is variety. There's a bunch of different stuff going on that I've done a ton of sites. And then as they keep scrolling, then they're presented with videos of me talking, and then maybe some animations, you know. So you really want to be giving a variety of imagery as people go through your site.
Okay. So just keeping it exciting. Don't bore them.
Totally. And answer their questions. That's the real answer to your question. It's not about it's not about like imagery in that sense. Like the real reason someone's going to stay on a site is if, wow, these guys are nailing it. This is exactly what I'm looking for.
Do you want to stay away from controversy?
No. Do
you want to be controversial?
I will give my honest opinion, or I will tell you that I don't have one.
Okay. Gotcha. All right. And what about, because you said variety. So variety I get as far as like, subject matter or visually. What about fonts? I've heard a lot of different things about fonts, using too many fonts or keeping the font too much alike on the same page, because then it kind of does get a little mono. It does look a little bit too similar. How does that work when you're using fonts, keeping it exciting and keeping it different, but not making it look like it's just jumbled up in there?
Man, after your racial equity podcast, that is not where I thought you were going with controversy. No, I definitely have answers for that. So you definitely need to keep a consistent scheme, right? And you don't. One of the things one of my design teachers told me way back was like, tally up all the different fonts that you're using on a page, like all the different weights, sizes, everything, and you'll like give yourself 1 point for each of them, and you want to keep that score as low as possible without making your page boring to look at.
Okay.
So typically what I say is you want to have a heading font, a body font, and maybe a subheadline font. And you can have those be different from each other, but they still need to match. So font pairings is like one of the major areas of study in typography, which is, the study of fonts. So there's a lot that goes into this. I like to give a client a few different options of fonts when we're in that design phase, so they can kind of determine what fits like the brand image that they have in their head. But whatever, there's a way to make any font, not any font. There's a way to make most of the modern like popular fonts today work with most industries. So I kind of let that be up to the client, and then we just make their design around that.
Okay. So it is a bit of an art, though. It is involved in, and I don't think a lot of people really look into that too much, that it's not always just the words you use, it's how those words look on the page that might attract the eye. So and
absolutely,
the whole point is to be attractive, right? Because you want them to like being on that page, because you can say all the right things and you can maybe even solve all the right problems, but if it's not pretty enough for them to read, you're kind of just you're screaming to nobody there. So that does make
what
a big
I tell
difference.
my designers about that is like, you need to have two things when you're worrying about your typography. One is contrast between like your headlines. So like, the section headline needs to be a different enough font that they can tell which one's on top. Who's the boss in this relationship? It should be pretty obvious. And then the other one is ease of reading. So don't put too much text in a row, like in one big paragraph. And if you do have multiple lines of text, make sure there's enough spacing between those lines. That's like a setting you can control. You want to make sure that everything's really easy for people to read, even if they have bad eyes and they're on a small screen.
Okay. And if you're in an industry like mine, where the fine print must be present, is there any kind of rule of thumb when it comes to the fine print?
Yeah, it depends on your industry specific regulations. What I tell people is we don't create fine print in a way that it can't be read. But typically we put it in like the footer of the website, unless your industry requires that it's somewhere else. And because that way it automatically goes to every page, and you can't get in any trouble. And it's also not getting in your way. But there are specific contrast ratios on like a luminosity scale is what it's called. And that ensures that people who, even if they have disabilities, like I mentioned, and I know I keep bringing this up, but it's a really big thing today. If people have disabilities, they can still read it and you can't get in trouble. And then you don't want to let it go below like a certain size, and that varies per font.
Right. So you don't want it to be prominent, but it also still has to be readable. I know I've heard some radio ads where they'll have their fine print and like they speed it up so fast you can't understand anything that happens. Or like if you're watching TV and it's a movie that's been reformatted for television. Have you seen how fast they scroll through the credits at the end? It's like, are you kidding? Oh, you got to put that thing in slow
motion. Why even do it?
Right? It's almost like
those pharmaceutical ads with the side effects.
Oh, thank God though, because most of the time the side effects are longer than the actual pluses to the darn thing.
Yeah, maybe they need a different advertising medium.
Opt-ins. And I know this is actually kind of going backwards a little bit, but when it comes to opt-ins, there's a lot of different things that I have heard that you have to do for an opt-in or a double opt-in. Is filling out the form, like, again, let's use my example. If they have to fill out the form to get a quote, is that opting in, or does it have to be a specific box that they check to opt in?
I don't know if there's a good answer to this question. I know that most email marketing platforms will tell you that they do require that you have some kind of a checkbox that says, I agree to receive promotional materials,
Okay.
but that's software specific. I'll tell you, if you're going to go outside of that, where, you're just going to subscribe them to something, you're probably going to get a lower open rate. And when I say that, I mean the percentage of people who open your emails when you send it to them. So having something that people are consciously signing up for is going to make that the content that you're sending them much more well received. So I advise people to do that. However, if you do have that checkbox and they don't check it and you start sending them stuff anyways, then you're really, not doing what you said you would do. And I think that's something you should try to avoid. So I don't have those on my forms, and I don't send them like a bunch of email, but I reserve the right to if I ever have something that I want to like really promote. Like, for example, if I'm releasing some new product on my website shop, like, which, is something that we're doing this month, I'm still going to email everybody who's ever worked with me, even though they didn't opt in, and I'm be like, hey, it's Max. It's been a while since we talked, that kind of thing, because they didn't opt out. You know what I mean? It's kind of like checking the default box in the opposite direction.
So, sorry. So when they're filling out that form, it's technically not opting in, because they're not opting in to receive promotional information or any other contact other than what they're asking for on that form. Technically, is that right?
I guess I couldn't speak to like technically if they are or not. There may be some kind of like legal thing there, and maybe I'm speaking out of turn here. But in my opinion, like, if they want to unsubscribe, they'll unsubscribe.
Gotcha. Okay.
I just don't want them to not check the box and then me not be able to email them.
Sure. And what
I spent
is
all that money getting them to sign up?
Yeah, no kidding. And what is a double opt-in?
So it's when someone signs up to be on your newsletter, for example, and then your newsletter sends them a confirmation. It's like, hey, do you really want to be on this newsletter?
Okay.
And then they click the button, and then they've opted in twice. And then that person has higher intent. They're more engaged in it, but you're going to get fewer people. And that's kind of the trade-off with all lead generation efforts, right? You put a bunch of questions on your form, you're going to have fewer people fill it out, but the people who do fill it out are going to be more committed. So you have to find that balance for your business and your industry. There's all these tips and tricks on like how to game that and how to use psychology to kind of get people
the quantity versus quality kind of thing. You might get more by doing some of those things, but they may not be as good. Whereas if you do a double opt-in, these people are serious and they definitely want it, but you're going to get fewer people, but they're probably going to be better leads.
Yeah. And I think it also depends on your industry as well. Like,
sure.
If you're in a B2C industry, you probably want to make it as simple as possible. But if you're in an industry like mine, where my whole business revolves around people following a process that I need them to go through as we're building their website, I want them to kind of jump through some hoops for me at the beginning of the process. Kind of sets the tone for the relationship. And that's something to consider as well when you're getting started with this kind of thing.
Okay. Yeah, because it shows them that you are doing specific things to narrow down their specific needs. Therefore, it shows the attention to detail. That's a good point. I like that point. So take us through the process that you go through with a new client. Somebody's wants to talk to Max about getting having you build their website. Take us through that process, start to finish here.
Yeah. So my first sales call with a client we call it a blueprint session. It's when we start with some basic questions like what I did with you, like how does your website make money for your business? Who's your target audience? A few other questions like that. And then we build out what's called a sitemap. I call it a blueprint because I try not to use technical terms in my sales process, but it's a sitemap essentially. It's like a list of all the pages that are going to be on the site, basically what each one of them is trying to accomplish. We make sure that all of the buyers, like their buyers, not my buyers, their buyers' biggest questions are answered on that website. And we make sure that we have a plan. And that serves two purposes. One, it shows them that like, hey, this guy has a plan for my website. And two, it shows them like, it shows me what is the scope of this project. Will I be able to give this guy a price on this call? So then, once we've kind of gone through the details of getting the project started, we'll do wireframes, which is if you think of sitemap as the map for your whole site at a high level, wireframes are kind of the map for each page at the next lower level. So it's the content strategy for each page. In what order are we going to guide the customer through which content? Once we've got that finalized, we present them with 2 design directions for like the aesthetics. That's when we go through things like fonts, colors, textures, if we're sourcing stock photos, we'll do that. And kind of give them like a sense of what the feel of their website's going to be. Once they've decided on that, and we do that by like designing half of their homepage 2 different ways.
Okay.
So once they've told us which they like better and what they like about each, we're like, okay, great. And then we'll just build their whole website according to that. They give us, while they're working on their first round of feedback, we go through and optimize things like SEO, page speed, accessibility for people with disabilities, like I keep saying, cross-browser responsiveness, all the boxes that you need to check in order to launch a website, essentially. And then they give us their first round of feedback. We implement it. Then they give us a second round of feedback. We implement it. And then we go through our procedures for launch, which is like a 100-step checklist.
Okay. And as you said before, the most common question, how long does that process take?
So it depends on the number of pages. On average, most clients that come to us need about 10 unique page templates. And that process is about a month to 2 months. And the biggest variable there is how fast do they get us those revisions? How long is that list of revisions? How responsive are they to like looking at deliverables that we send them? And, depending on their answers to those questions, it'll be somewhere between 1 month and 2 months. And if we really can't get a hold of them, it can go longer than that.
Okay. It's good to have an idea, of expectations of the process itself, but they do need to be very involved. You can't just, say, hey, build me a website and expect somebody to know what it is exactly that you're looking for, because everybody, the personality of the company should be present in their website.
That's very true.
What is the difference, and when should you use landing pages versus websites?
Landing pages are for specific campaigns, right? So if you want to run Google ads to a page, you shouldn't be running them to your homepage of your website. You should be running them to a specific page that speaks to the specific keywords that you're targeting in that campaign. I run Facebook ads. I run them to a landing page. But when I have a new prospective client, I want them to just go learn everything about me. I send them to my actual page, my website.
So is it a page on your website, or is it a completely separate thing altogether? Like if I was trying to drive people to get quotes, right? Like my particular ads out there, like, for a free quote, do I create its own separate thing, or can I use the quote page, the form page that is already on my website?
I like to build it all into my website so I don't have to redo all my marketing systems every single time that I create a new campaign, because I'm sure as an entrepreneur, you're going to have like a million ideas for different ads that you want to run and all that stuff. But no, you should have a page that specifically is for that campaign. Like I wouldn't just send them to your basic request or quote page. You want to if you're running an ad for, I don't know, plumbing, right? You want to make an ad about like the area that you're targeting. Like you want to be geolocation specific. You want to talk about the specific pain points of someone who might be searching on Google. Maybe that's different than someone who you handed your business card to. You want to really be speaking to the audience that you're trying to attract.
So what's the process of getting a page? Because that's not part of the website, right?
Sometimes it is.
A lot of times sometimes you can just create a new tab on your website for that particular promotion or whatever it is that you're trying to funnel them into.
Yeah, and you don't even need to have it like in the main navigation at the top. Sometimes you can just have a page that you can only find if someone has the link to it.
Okay, the non-visible.
They find it on SEO.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, I wonder about how that works. So you can have the non-visible page. So if somebody just goes to the website, they're not going to see it. There's not going to be any access to it unless they have that specific link that you probably included in some type of post. If they click that link, then they have access to it. But otherwise, it's just there. It's kind of hidden in the background. Nobody will see it.
That's exactly right. Yeah.
Okay.
And a lot of clients, when they're ready to do a website redesign and they come to me and they want to work with me, they'll say, yeah, we have these 3 or 4 ad campaigns that do really well for us. We also want to include these landing pages in a new and redone way to match our aesthetic. So then we'll do that. And then whenever they need new landing pages, then they'll contact me and we'll say, let's talk about it and we'll build it out for them.
That was actually my next question, is how often does that happen and then what's the process? So basically you can, like if you have a particular promotion that you're doing 2 months, 3 months long. So you can do a couple of different promotions each year, just create new landing pages for each one. And then of course you can always keep them there, right? Because they're hidden. So you can always keep them there and redo that promotion at a later time, anytime that you want to reuse that link.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And we only offer that to clients whose websites we've already built. It's not something that we'll do for like someone who is our first time working with us. But yeah, that's how we maintain the relationship, is we give them the things that they need for their marketing department.
That's cool because it keeps it evolving. It's not like a once and done. And how often should websites be revised and updated? Now, excluding blogs, right? Because blogs can be daily, weekly, monthly, whatever for blogs. And I know that updates the website. It also updates the information. It also updates and adds things for SEO. But as a norm, as far as just keeping up with the needs of your customers, and I know that's going to be industry specific as well, but just making sure that it's staying fresh. How often should these websites be looked at and updated?
There's a couple of variables there. So the first one is, how often are people coming to your website? If all that it is an entry point into the sales process, they probably are only going to go to it once. So in that sense, aesthetically, as long as it matches the modern styles of today and it's like, it's not antiquated, then you really don't need to update it too much. However, the sophisticated approach here is to be, when you're driving traffic to a specific page, is to like run tests and see what works best. How can I improve the outcome that I'm looking for statistically? And in that sense, you should be improving it as often as you can to the level that it's profitable for you to do so.
Okay.
And then the other thing is, a lot of companies are always adding services, and that's another reason why you would want to change your site.
Just to keep it updated and fresh as you're doing those types of things.
Yeah.
And I mentioned blogs. How useful is that overall when it comes to SEO? When you're doing blogs or articles that are relevant to the industry that you're in?
It's useful, right? But it's necessary, but not sufficient.
Okay.
is what I'd say. So you need to have a lot of factors in order to rank on Google. And if a blog is the best way to answer a question for one of your customers, then I say that's a great way to do it. What I'm seeing now is like that most like companies with sophisticated marketing departments aren't using their blogs in the traditional sense of the word, where they just kind of post whatever they think and then it appears in chronological order. They're creating these like resource centers. So if someone like wants to learn anything about web design, they would come to my resource center and they would have like, okay, here's what you need to know if you're interested in SEO. Here's what you need to learn if you're interested in X, Y, fonts, whatever. And then they're presented with several timeless pieces of content that aren't like, they're going to be completely relevant a year from now as they are today. Or you can keep them updated. So being kind of a repository of information rather than just spewing whatever you think of that day, like onto the page.
So it's not so much about opinions. I actually like that idea of the resource center, because it's almost like adding new tabs to the website without adding new tabs to the website. They have one place that they can go, and then, or like a frequently asked questions type situation, where if they want to know more about one specific thing, they can just click on that and it opens up, whatever article is written about that, or informational, I guess, informational subject about each thing. And they can just learn more about that specific thing that they're looking for.
And my favorite thing about that is it's so useful in your sales cycle, right? Like, what's the most annoying thing you can do to someone is send them an email that's like, hey, just following up, haven't heard back from you, on the proposal. And then you send them the same email like 2 weeks later or whatever
right.
your follow-up time is. How much better would it be if you could send them a link to something on your website like, hey, it's been a while since we talked. I wanted to send you this information here. I know you're looking to redo your site. This is some information I put together for people who, need to have a website that's a mobile first. It's designed for mobile. You give them actual content that they're going to be interested in. A, it positions you as an extra, as a authority. B, it's less annoying. And C, they're on your website so you can track what they're doing and they're thinking of you. It's
more interactive that way. They're more involved. Mm-hmm. That's awesome. I like that idea. My throat today. Holy cow. Max,
you warned me.
I know I did, man. I tell you what, it's because not having coffee this morning totally threw me off. My whole day is a mess. That's our time for today, man. If you wouldn't mind, I definitely want everybody to know how they can get a hold of you, ask you more questions. I'm sure I probably could have asked a million more that just slipped in my mind because of the lack of coffee this morning. So tell folks how they can get a hold of you, your website address, and things like that so they can ask the questions that they have.
Yeah. So my website is sheragency.com. That's spelled SHER agency.com. That's where you'll find my agency. I'm also really active on Instagram. I'm Max_Sher.
Awesome. Thanks so much for joining us this morning, man. I appreciate you taking the time out and chatting with us and giving us the information you gave. That was awesome.
Yeah, that was super fun. Thanks, Craig.
You bet. Thank you for joining us this week. Go to our website at thebizreveal.com to catch all of our past episodes. We're available on all podcast apps, or you can watch any of our episodes on the Biz Reveal YouTube channel. I'm Craig Sawyer, and this is the Biz Reveal. Till next time.